developing young dentists and helping them blossom to their full professional potential. So with branches in Kololon, Tinda, Entebbe, Kigali, Jubilee Dental has now celebrated 28 years of service. Together with his wife, Lorna, they also founded Vine International Christian Academy, which is a center of excellence. And it provides children with Christian education. The institution focuses on training and disciplining children to become men and women who can positively impact their society. So Lorna and James are parents to 3 young men and 1 young lady. They're also grandparents to 2. He has served as a lecturer in Magara University, the Faculty of Health Sciences. He did this for 18 years. And then 14 years later, he was invited to serve as the dean of the then newly founded Uganda Christian University School of Dentistry. He's the pioneer dean. He serves on several boards. He's a current chair of Jubilee Dental Network. He's a board member, Intercessors for Africa. Until recently, he has served as the chairman, Intercessors for Uganda, chairman, board of directors of the Uganda Heart Institute, chairman, board of directors. Uganda Heart Institute. He's the chairman of the think tank Center for Strategic Leadership. Dr. James Magara is a futuristic with a doctoral degree in strategic leadership, concentrating on strategic foresight from Regent University, Virginia Beach, USA. And in 2017, he authored a book entitled Positioning Africa for the 21st Century, the Pivotal Role of Leadership and Think Tanks. It is available in the local bookstores and Amazon. Please welcome with me a teacher, a creative, a strategic leader, and a mentor, a role model, Dr. James Magara. Over to you, Dr. James. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pamela, and a very good morning to you all. It's been great following the series here. I've been on, not all of them, but I followed quite a number of them, and it's great to hear the different testimonies. It's been a time of great inspiration, and just want to appreciate the AKBF leadership for putting this together. I'm getting more and more glad that I stepped away from things. You know, when you start some things, people can't look beyond you. But I'm glad that you people have taken the baton and really run with it. I still remember the time we came back from the Pretoria conference in 2006, I think it was, when we came back, and that was 2004, 2005, I didn't check out the date. A group of people decided to start the AKBF chapter in Uganda. It started in Nigeria in 1999. And it's had its ups and downs. But I'm really glad that the next generation of leaders have picked it up and they're taking it to new heights. So I really cheer you on. Please keep doing what you're doing. And it's great to see you step out in confidence and know that just as God spoke and used us, He can use you too. So that's really wonderful to see. So thank you very much, AKBF leadership. I want to appreciate all the presenters I've listened to. I've learned something. Even the ones that I haven't listened to, I intend to go back and listen to them. And also intend to, there are some messages I want to share with other people because they've really been very good messages. Very, very inspirational. And yeah, really the word of God. God is at work in the marketplace. That is really wonderful to see. It's certainly a very different scene from the one that we've had in previous years. God is at work. So once again, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts. When Phoebe asked me about what to share, this is what we came up with: cast your bread upon the waters. And I will be using experience as well to illustrate the points that come here. When you look at this passage, I've had it preached on many times. not very many times, but I've had people preach on it, and usually it's talking about giving, give, don't expect anything in return, you'll get back, and so on and so on. But if you look at it from its original text, it actually seems to be talking about business. And there are some lessons for us here. So allow me to begin by just reading look at two translations of this text. This is from I think it's English Standard Version. It says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you'll find it after many days. Give a portion to 7, or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning, sow your seed, and at night, withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good." Now, as I was preparing for this, I looked at several translations, and the one translation that really brings it out very profoundly, it's a paraphrase, the New Living Translation, but it brings it out more in line with what I want to share this morning. And let's just go through the same scriptures using the New Living Translation. It says, "Send your grain across the seas, and in time, profits will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. When clouds are heavy, the rains come. But if a tree falls north and south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind, or the mystery of a tiny baby forming in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God, who does all things rather. Plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you do not know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both." So this really basically summarizes it. I'll make additional comments just to help of the Holy Spirit bring these more to life. So the advice given here by the preacher this is timeless advice. It's sound business advice. We're talking about occupying until it comes. It's talking about investing. In our day, to be investing money. In their days, their bread was everything. If the farm failed, if the yield failed, the crop failed, there'll be disaster upon the land. In our day, things have moved on. And if we put it in our language, our modern language, it says, invest generously, be patient, and you'll see a good return eventually. Don't be stingy, don't be close-handed, extravagantly open-handed, give out. And we're talking about the picture here, you can see in the infographic, there is a ship that has gone out to the waters. It's a commercial business through sea trade. In the days of Solomon, going out in the sea was, even today by this, less risky than it was, but less risky because of all the modern ships that have been built. But we do still hear about ships now and then, not very commonly, but big ships falling. At least in Lake Victoria, we do. We hear of boats, capsizing and big traders losing everything and their lives sometimes. So sending your grain, which you have worked for and you now have excess, because by the time you send it across, you have access. It was seen as risky. It was actually risky. It was more risky, definitely, than simply replanting it or hoarding it. But it provided more profit. The man who, if it succeeded, provided profit. So the investors who invested in this, if they succeeded, if the returns came back, they did reap big profit. And so some traders would send out, grain across the waters to foreign ports in the hope of trading the grain for other things. Often they would exchange them with, the ship would not come back empty. They would get stones, precious stones. You hear about the trade in the days of Solomon, how they would get gold from Ophir and so on, spices and special wood and so on. If the ship returned with such cargo, those were taken as exotic goods. But it's always interesting to see what exotic, this year my son got married, his wife is Polish. And so when our in-laws came here, they were really enjoying the mangoes and the oranges and the tropical fruits. They said, well, we can't believe mangoes just grow on the streets, in people's compounds, avocados. So back home, these are very exotic. They're very, very expensive. If they were putting them in their suitcases, they would carry them back. But now for us here, we see apples as exotic, which are very common in other places. So foreign goods are always taken as exotic. In this case, the people who came back with exotic goods were able to sell them at very high prices. And we also saw this in the 17th century, 18th century, when European traders were sending small, in the Vasco da Gamas and so on, ships on hazardous journeys to the Far East, and to exchange them for, to exchange their goods for spices. The spices were very expensive, and people who got spices, made a lot of money. And so it's not very easy for a merchant to risk all they have on this kind of mission, because once the ship left, you lost all control. You depended on the traders. Everything was at the mercy of the weather. And you waited many, many months. Communication was not there. So you just had to wait, sometimes for a year or two, before anything came back. You didn't know whether the ship had gone or shipwrecked or anything like that. So really here we are talking about risk. We're talking about risk. Now I want to share, as I bring out the different points here, giving illustrations from two businesses, their service businesses, my wife and I started, that have stood the test of time. There are many lessons, but it's a time like this, we can't share all the lessons. We'll just share a few of them. Jubilee Dental, which was mentioned in the introduction, and Vine International Christian Academy, their service, business in the service sector. We see them as service, but because they exchange a service for money, it's also a business. In 1994 is when Jubilee Dental started. I was a fresh returnee from my master's studies. I didn't grow up in a business family. When you grow up in a business family, you already have these things running in your veins. I didn't. My parents were government servants. My wife, perhaps our late mother, was very business thrifty. But we really didn't think of business. I was thinking about academia, something like that. So it was not in my thoughts. When I came back from abroad, I was really thinking about building a career in academics. And that year we prayed a lot about our future. And the Lord just began to nudge us into this area. It was a very scary venture. I'd never taken any kind of loan. And I had this night dealing, seeing what how things would turn out, worrying about whether I would pay back this money and so on. So that is one we'll talk about. I'll give you examples. And then the other one is Vine International Christian Academy, which started as a homeschool. It was a homeschool in our house. And again, we were really not thinking about a school like that. Oh, well, maybe we were. Actually, we were, because a few of us, our friends, were looking at, starting a school. We're looking for alternatives. We even went, I remember that time they were selling the International School of Uganda, here near the current British Embassy. Went and looked at it, faith in God, God is going to provide, that kind of stuff. And the Lord didn't provide, and so we had now to come back. And when the Lord began to talk to us, start from your home. And I remember we started in the garage. At that time, we're really not thinking so much about a school, because we wanted to just get something for our children. As time went on, the following year especially, it became clear to us that God was putting a challenge for us to start something new. Homeschooling was really fairly new at the time. It was a risk we took. It was a very big risk. Because we put our children in that risk. We kept saying, if we mess this up, our children will speak about us for future generations. But God has blessed them. Together, these two businesses employ more than 100 people. So we contribute to people's lives. I've seen God use these businesses, to do a lot of things for families to work with us. So I'll give more examples. I don't have too much time. So that is by way of introduction. So let's look at these 6 principles here. And the very first one there is casting your bread upon the waters. I've already illustrated it. Be willing to take risks. Now, I also want to emphasize here that you cannot divorce this, what has been shared in all this series, from your walk with God. Please don't do it, because it's very inspiring to hear someone is doing this and you run and want to do it. You need to hear what God is telling you. It's that walk with God that will lead you, to the next thing and the next thing. I listened to, is it Chai Plus? Oh, I forget exactly what they call it, Chai and more. It was her walk with the Lord that led her there. Yesterday I listened to a testimony about housing. I'll give you an experience of housing. Ours were led very differently. So everything you're hearing this week, don't just run off and do it. Yes, we're talking about taking a risk, and whatever God calls you to do, there will be some risk. Just be sure, because faith is required. But let it be part of your close walk with God, because God may be asking you to follow what someone else has done, or He may be asking you to a totally different way. So when we talk about principles, I'm always cautious about that, because it's very easy for people to just pick up and run. But here, basically what it's saying, be willing to take risks. Nothing will happen unless you step out in faith. Every walk with God will involve that. Of course, you take your time to pray, you listen, you check with spiritual oversight, and then you say, as far as I know now, I'm convinced, I have a strong sense God is leading us this way, and I'm willing to take the risk. Sometimes it takes a bit of time. When we started homeschooling, we labored, we wrestled for several months until it became so clear. And I'll never forget the day I walked to the school our kids were in and put in a letter saying our kids are not coming back. And this was a school that had a lot of people wanting places, and I knew I was burning my boats. But at that time, we didn't have any materials. We just had a prophetic word, strong sense of faith. My wife had visited a school that was offering the SC curriculum in Zambia. She came back saying, I see what God is calling us to. Have seen it. So we said, okay, let's take the leap. So it wasn't just wake up one morning and take the leap. Maybe some of you are gifted to do that sort of thing. I move a bit cautiously, but I try and hear God. And when I think I've heard God, I'll make a move. So spread your investments. Going back to Jubilee Dental, when Jubilee Dental started, there were no investments. We had zero savings, nothing. We just had a dream in our hearts. And here it's talking about spreading what you have. When Vine started, the story was different, because there, at that time, we were looking for, we had paid off our debts, and now saying, Lord, let's buy a house. We're renting. And God was saying, well, I can't go into, there's a long story, but it became clear God was saying, don't buy a house. And I was saying, but we are renting. God was saying, no, don't buy a house. Invest in your business. And that kept happening, by the way, until we only entered our house 4 years ago. And people would look at me and say, but why are you still renting? Some people even told me, you're foolish, you're still renting at this time. By the time we entered our house, our children are leaving home. And but that's how God led us. Now, God may lead you completely differently. That's why I'm saying you need to have your walk with God to know what God is telling you. So invest, spread your investments. At that time, God was saying, invest in this thing that I've put in your hands, education. Investment is in education. It says in the book of Deuteronomy about serving the Lord your God. No, that's the Lord your God who gives you power to make wealth, that He may establish His covenant. And I remember I was asking God, what aspect of your covenant are you talking about? And at that time, the Lord told us education. So we had to take all our savings, all of it, and put it in the school. And so it says, so let's move on down here. So it is a call here. We're getting a call to take risks by faith, to take business risks by faith, by casting your bread upon the sea of uncertainty. And the promise is, if you are following, hearing God, there'll be mistakes, of course, along the way. That's part of the journey. You will be able to recoup the investment after many days, which is another important thing to underline. In our generation today, we want quick fixes, instant millionaires. You know, it doesn't happen that way. Unfortunately, I've worked with this God for over 40 years. I know it doesn't do things. He can do things that way, but an overnight success took many, many years to build up. You know, especially the younger people on this forum, I see young people, I work with younger people coming on board, and there's this enamourment with instant success. Well. Just be ready. If you want to walk God's way, be ready to walk. Be ready to be patient after many days. So take risks in the commercial activities. And commercial activities, as God speaks to you, have faith in God, you'll have a good return. So here we're coming to the next verse, which talks about diversifying, which is the next key thing. So I've already given an illustration here that everything that I've done in the business sphere, and I've given 2 examples here, have involved risk. Have we had businesses that failed? Yes. At that time when God was beginning to stir us up, we started, I remember the first thing we did, our first venture into business was to run a shop. That was about 20 years ago, no, it was not our first actually. It was about 30 years ago. One of the first, not only the first, one of the first. The time my wife was trying to look for something which she could do. We already started Jubilee then. And, we set up this shop, put someone in the shop, and boy, did we get robbed. We got robbed until we closed it, So I've tried a few things that haven't worked. In case you think everything I touched has been successful. I've experienced that as well. All right, so let's look at the next thing then, and that is to diversify. Give a portion to the 7 or even to 8. For you know not what disaster may happen on the earth. Give a portion to 7, even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on the earth. Now here we are being told about the ancient practice in a feast. If you had a big feast at your home, you'd hear about, for example, King Xerxes, giving a banquet and giving so much to other people, so giving a portion. In Buganda, they say Sabasajja Gawudde, so a feast where the host would give tasty portions of meat to his guests. And here the teacher is telling us, do this while you can. Now, of course, you can look at this in the context of giving. We're looking at this in the context of business, before some unforeseen disaster strikes. Now, so the question here is, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Invest in several ventures, because crisis by nature are unpredictable. Who knows what the next economic crisis will be? But it's a little more than that. By the time you give a portion to 7 or 8, it means 1, you have the portion. And if you don't have the portion, you can't give. So here we're seeing somebody who has the resources, who has the ability to give to 7 or to 8, and there are different levels of ability. You have a choice there. Either you can hoard the portions, or you can put them in a safer place. Hoarding would mean that you keep them, you can keep them in the bank. And I just want to say that, without going into a lot of detail, that is the least Jesus said, about the man, remember the steward, the one who just hid it and brought it back as it was. Jesus said you should at least have given it the bankers. Like that was the least thing you can do, give it the bankers. So the idea of having money you just look at and I have so much in the bank, by the way, it's very risky, especially in the days that we're in. Here it's saying invest. From the business perspective, this advice is looking at accumulated wealth. So the options in ancient Israel were limited. Hoarding had its dangers. If the barn could catch fire, things could happen. And the expansion of agriculture was not very easy in those days. They didn't have First of all, the technology wasn't there. Land was limited because land belonged to different families and clans. So that option was not there. And the option really was to take the grain that was excess and invest it in some kind of way. And one of the ways was, to send it over to ships. But so the phrase you're giving portions to 7 or 8, it's talking about, in our context, about prudent and careful investment of excess that you have. As you follow God, God will bring excess. But how do you manage it? How do you manage the excess? Africans have been chided for being consumers. In fact, I read a statement some years ago which said African millionaires are consumer millionaires. They have money, they just show it off, they spend. They spend. And that is something that we need to change in our day. Move more, learn how to invest. And thank God now there are many different things coming up. We have organizations that are helping us to learn about investment, because we never really learned these things, many of us, if we're to be honest. Our parents probably didn't know. Some of you may have been fortunate that your parents knew these things, and so you grew up with all this knowledge, but most people didn't. But you can learn. You can learn, and platforms like this help us to learn. And I've seen others mentioned on this platform where you can go and learn. Go and learn. So diversification. Even in those days, if a man of some means took this approach, they could potentially reduce the risk of hoarding. So the thing is, you're not relying on one source of income, and let's bring it down. Even if you're a government employee, what else can you do? Don't depend on only the salary you get. Even if you're not a government employee, you're an employee. Yesterday we had a testimony of a brother who was an employee, but he was thinking of diversifying. And see what God did with him. So even if this is not only for business people. Ask God. Ask God to give you ideas. What else can I do? What else can I do? Without cheating your employer, by the way. That will not bring a blessing on you. So here it's saying the world is an unpredictable place, and you never know what might go wrong. So in my case, I really was a very reluctant business person. As I told you, my background was not in business, and I did not think about it, as actually God pushed us into it. And when you're pulled in an area and you're trying to resist, I didn't jump and run with it. I think the entrepreneur's streak has always been in me, but was stifled in the early years. God has just been causing it to come out. So what we found useful, even the idea of going to school, to start a school. By the way, that school, which started as a home school, has blossomed. It has blossomed. It's amazing the journey God has led us through. We now have land, we have buildings. And God helped us, gave us ideas that I don't think I have too much time to share all of them, but in building the school, we never took a bank loan, never. We did take a bank loan at one particular point on expansion, but all those early times we did it, and God would just give us ideas of what to do. By the way, even with Jubilee Dental, now Jubilee Dental has never taken a bank loan. Never. The closest we got to it, but in the beginning, by the way, not even bankable. I remember going to banks, and banks would tell, yeah, do you have a land title? No, I didn't have a land title. Or do you have a car? No, I didn't have a car. Okay, we shall look at it and get back to you. I went to about 4 banks. I'm glad God closed those doors. I'm really glad. And recently, some banks have been coming to get me to do things with them. But I'm really glad, because I've had an experience now of a mortgage, house mortgage, and I've told myself I'm never, ever going to do this again. Because the banking system, from my own assessment, I'm sorry if those of you are bankers here, but this whole loan business is heavily flawed. If you analyze it, I'll stop it at that. Anyway, so what we found is that for example, when the school was starting, all the investments, almost all of them, came from our savings from the business. Now, interesting, the time came when the school has been able to bail out the clinic when the clinic needed to expand. And the more recent thing was around 2018, when we wanted to set up, again, diversify within we set up a lab, a dental lab. And it was quite a big investment. And I said, okay, now I think we are bankable. Let's go to the bank. We talked with the bank, we discussed, we gave out. They have all our information. I mean, we bank every day. They have everything. They kept asking questions and asking questions and asking questions. And meanwhile, we're trying to do this before an anniversary, which was in 2019. We spent months until I just got angry and just said, okay, cancel everything. And we were not able to do what we wanted to do by our anniversary, our 25th anniversary. I'm so glad that thing fell through. Actually, I didn't realize God was just locking it. It was, in my sense, there was no reason why they didn't give us this loan. I even talked to the people. I said, "What's happening? You know, I've been pushing this thing. What's happening? You know me. You." No, thank God we didn't, because a few months later we had this whole situation of lockdown and what have you. I think would have been in a spot of trouble. So that's how God has led. I'm not saying don't take bank loans. I'm just saying be very cautious, get good advice, make sure you can pay back, and make sure you're willing. You know, it's a cost, it's money, you pay for it. And so gauge what is the price of that money. So what happened at that time, illustration, at that time, lockdown happened, Vine was not operating, they had to put hold on projects and so on. So we're able to arrange a loan, intercompany loan. And that we got what we wanted without, you know, all the exorbitant interest we're going to pay. So an example of, you know, diversification and potential benefits. But that's there are many other examples one could bring on that. So let's move on. Our time is running out. So number 3, it's talks about both good times, both good and tough times will come for every business. And I think we just need to know this will happen. It says, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the north or south, and the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. Now, this shows a tree that has fallen. It doesn't show that it has fallen on someone's house or not. But if all your investments were in that house, you may be in a spot of trouble. If that house caught fire, that's the logic here. So good times don't last forever. Misfortune can occur in any direction. They can occur in any direction. Now we think about the illustration of clouds. When a cloud comes, you may look at it as a blessing. Maybe it comes, it empties itself. And when it empties itself, there's no more blessing. There's no more rain until the next time. They no longer have rain. So let me just see how I interpret this. Times of abundance will come. But the thing, the tendency we have as human beings is to think that if something is doing well, it will always do well. And the reality is not just that. You just need to look back in our own time and see. There was a time when, you know, the big thing in Uganda was Magendo. Magendo. For the younger people who don't know what Magendo is, it was that black market business in the Idi Amin days. And the people really prospered in those days where the people were doing Magendo. That, now, if you are doing Magendo and you thought Magendo is everything, you know, it came and passed. And then you can look at other examples, you know, where certain businesses were really flourishing. And, you know, Ugandans have this habit of flocking like a bird. You hear that this business is doing well, you just rush there, you know, without even, in our context, you don't ask God, it is doing well, you just go. Someone opens up a saloon, everyone opens up a saloon. Someone opens up an eatery, everyone. So now I think I've gone off track here. But the point here is that abundance will give way to scarcity. Now, it is in those times that, you know, that you feel the impact. That's when the tree has fallen, you know, it will lie there. But thank God the tree doesn't fall in all directions. If it falls in the north, it's not in the south. If it falls in the south, it's not in the east. So the picture here is that even when there's a disaster, there are things that are doing well. And sometimes it's hard to see them. I think we're hearing more and more now people who in the lockdown, when everyone was crying, there are some people who are doing well, who began there. Like yesterday we had from our pastor yesterday of how he began, you know, what he's doing now in the time when the tree had fallen in one direction, he moved in another direction. So in the context here, as we say, If the tree falls in the north, woe unto you if you're only in the north, as it were. Now, so don't be fooled. Don't be fooled into thinking that your line of business will always be viable and always be profitable. It may not, you know. And as we look now at the pandemic, I call it the pandemic, not the pandemic, many businesses went bust. So economic trends are variable, and something that's maybe profitable today may be loss-making tomorrow. Bubbles that do bust. Okay? So the advice here, street advice, is don't be in one place alone. Now, I just want to add here that as Christians, as believers in God, this is in the scriptures. So ask God, where else should I be? Where else do you want me to be? What else? This, you can't divorce this from your walk with God. You know, as you're praying, I know God is interested in your success in business. Ask Him, and maybe go beyond. It may not just be diversifying by doing other things. Sometimes it's within your business. We had Chai and Mo starting off with just serving tea. Now they're into hubs, and who knows what they'll be next time. You know, they'll probably be manufacturing if they're not already. You know. So what else? What else? What else? What other products can I offer? Which other ways can I serve my customers? How can I make things easier? That is part of diversifying. But just be aware that, you know, hard times will come. So invest diligently, invest widely. As I said, doesn't have to be multiple investments. You can expand your present line of business by adding features you didn't have to attract new customers and so on. Now, within our own, what we do in dentistry, one of the things that we've done over the years is just continually expand. You know, we're doing one thing, then we do another. The most recent addition was dental lab. Again, you need to understand dentistry to appreciate what that is. You know, usually it's a separate business. Those who make the dentures and prosthesis and so on. We invested in modern equipment to do that. And now God has given me some other ideas which are scaring me, but which I'm really looking to put out there. You know, God always stretches you to beyond what you can imagine, and so on. So let's go on to the next point. Don't make excuses. You know, he who observes the wind will not sow. And I've been a victim of this. And so I know what this is about. You know, he who regards the clouds will not reap. You know? Don't make excuses. This is a time you've got to throw off excuses. It's very easy to grow fearful and not want to invest when we're watching the news. The last 2 years, there's something I've been sitting on which I just put on hold. I said, no. With the way the world is going, with the way the globalists are pushing the world, and you see now what's happening with fuel and so on, I think I'll just stay tight. But, you know, God has been really nudging me, you know, and now I'm pretty sure God is saying, in spite of what you're seeing, you know, don't look at the news, you know, look at what I want to do. So I'm not saying be foolish, hear God, definitely hear God. And many times God will tell you to go counter to what's happening in society, you know. If you focus on what could go wrong, if you focus on what the news is telling us, you will never make any advance, you know. So work and diversify. Farmers can always have excuses for putting off work. The weather isn't promising, you know, the weather forecast is not good, the wind is getting up and so on. It's not good for sowing. I'll sow tomorrow. There's no rain in the air, all kinds of things, you know, in the context. But we're warned here that if you look at the weather, you'll fail. And I think if you look for them, you'll always find excuses or invent one, depending on your personality, not to do something. So here we are being advised not to listen too much to the things that you see. I'm not saying be foolish, you need to get sound advice. But remember, beyond sound advice, we are also spiritual beings. We hear God. You know, yes, get experts, but look beyond that as well. You know, so we have examples in the Bible of Isaac, who was told to sow in the famine, and in the same year he reaped 100-fold. You know, in the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 26. God told him, yes, there's a famine. Don't go down to Egypt. Everyone is saying go down to Egypt. Don't go. Stay here and reap and sow, you know. And he took a risk, and the Bible says he had a bumper harvest. And next, we are told he became extremely wealthy. Of course, he was the only one selling grain. Everyone else did not have grain. So he became the main source of grain. Now, in 2010, we were looking at expanding the school. We have our land here in Congo, and we need money to put up a building. We looked at different options, and I remember that time one of our parents whose children came into the school and really changed. This is a businessman who said, "Look, what are you trying to do?" We explained, said, "Well, I have some money lying around. I'm not using it. If you want to use it, you can use it. But all I will require from you is that you give me an interest, which will make sure I don't lose, to be above inflation." So we worked out a rate, which was good. And we start, but now I was so reluctant to start because that was, remember, 2010, interest rates were 30%. Everything was so expensive. And I remember I was in South Africa for a meeting. I stayed in my room on that Sunday. I put on the TV. I'd just been doing my Bible study, and I was reading about Joshua crossing the Jordan when the water was overflowing. And then I put on the TV, and the preacher is talking about the very same thing. I sat in that hotel room, and God was telling me, this is the time to start. Start now. And so we did. We started. It looked crazy. But, long story, that building, our first building on that site, our major building, God provided. We had to stop at some phase. At that time, we didn't know what to do again. We almost got into a bank situation. I walked away. At the last moment, again, we had everything. People were asking for more security and more security and more security. They undervalued the land that we had and so on. So eventually, I just walked away. I said, no. Up to date, one of our accountant at the school says, "Doctor, thank you so much." At that time, I told my wife no. My wife wanted to move ahead. She was saying, "We don't have answers." I said no. So they respected my decision. And they keep thanking me, "Thank you," because the things that followed up got us in very serious problems. So excuses. Let's move on to the next point. Trust God and follow him. You do not know the way the spirit comes to bones in the womb of a woman, the child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. Now, the thing here is just because life is uncertain does not mean that you do nothing. It does not mean that you hoard. And this is a time, especially in the time that we're in now, we need to hear what God is telling us, because this is a time you really want to hoard. Everything is not looking good, but God has this knack of pushing you against the tide. And so you need to hear, be sure. That's why I keep emphasizing, what is God telling you? What is God telling you? You need to hear what God is telling you. And I think I just need to illustrate this point as well. I hinted on it earlier. We really wanted, I remember in 1999, we really wanted, to have our own family home. We looked at homes. We almost lost money because of this whole thing. God kept closing doors. Till one morning, as I studied praying, and the Lord told me, focus on the business. So we had to continue renting. And then later, 2009, we were again saying, now it's time to start building our home. And we, again, cut long story short, God said, keep renting. So until 4 years ago, we were renting. And it didn't make sense. But looking back now, it makes a lot of sense, the way the Lord led us. And I'm not saying this is how God will lead you. You need to know. Yesterday, we were given a very powerful testimony of how, you can actually build your house. And maybe we could have done it differently, but this is how, our leading has been. Okay, so again, not waiting for circumstances to be perfect. We talked about that already. So trust God. We need, in this faith, in this journey, and especially the days we've entered, where God is seeking to manifest in the marketplace, we need to hear him. We need to trust him. And I can assure you, this is the time when you will need to hear it. If you're going into business, there are risks involved, but hearing God pays off handsomely, and following him pays off handsomely. All right, I need to leave time for discussions. I think I have just a few more minutes. So here we are talking about the womb. You don't know what's going on. God is working in the unseen. Is working. If he has sown a seed in your heart, then you can trust him that he will be working in the unseen. He has your interests at heart. Amen. The last point here is about not using faith in God as an excuse for lack of diligence. Be diligent. Now, the picture of in the morning, someone is sowing. At evening, they are sowing. Do not hold your hand. You don't know what will prosper. So in ancient days, farmers, the probably days of ancient Israel, they cultivated rocky soils, and you hear the problem of the soil, some of it falls on the rocks and so on. The yield is unpredictable. And the picture here is of someone sowing in the morning, continue to sow in the evening, and so on, not knowing which area will actually bring forth. So faith in God, and this is a risk that we have as believers. We can get into a soft la la land, God will see us through. Yes, God will definitely do all those things. But when you read the scriptures carefully, God's work is not totally devoid of us doing anything. God works with us. When God says, I will do it, often he's saying, you and I will do it. And we've looked at this passage as from the context that it was initially put in, which is a business context. I know it can be used to say give, invest, and so on. Give and give. And by the way, that's another very big part of giving, that your business or whatever you're doing becomes part of what God is doing in the marketplace to establish his covenant in the sphere that you're operating in, but also to build others, to build other things. And we've been privileged to underwrite a number of things that have started, business training programs, supporting Christian ministries, and so on. That is part of sowing and giving. We're talking about from the practical business sense, but there's also the other sense of just supporting the kingdom. I'd like to end with a caution that as we move in the marketplace, there's a spirit of mammon. So one of the things we need to do is to guard our hearts against covetousness, because it's very easy. A time can come where covetousness just swallows you, and I know what this is. And you really begin to see dollars and shillings, and your sense goes out of your head. Jesus warned about the power of mammon. It's very powerful. You either serve God or serve mammon. And anyone involved in this, all of us involved in business, we need to continually pray that God will free us, our hearts from the hold of mammon. This is scripture in Proverbs says, don't compare yourself to the rich, surrender your selfish ambition and evaluate them properly. For no sooner, that's the Passion Translation, no sooner than you start counting your wealth and it sprouts wings and flies away like an eagle in the sky. Here today, gone tomorrow. So warning against covetousness. Yes, God wants to bless us. He wants to bless the marketplace. He wants to raise stewards. He wants to work through you. But open your heart to God continually, that you will not be caught by covetousness. So in summary, be willing to take risks, diversify. Just know that both good and bad times will come for every business. Don't make excuses. Trust God as you follow him, and don't use faith in God as an excuse for lack of diligence. So thank you very much for listening, and I will now hand back to the moderator. I trust that God has spoken a thing or two to you this morning. God bless you.
Thank you very, very much. This was very enriching. Let's receive the message. God, we appreciate you that you choose us and set us apart to benefit from such wonderful settings, oh God. We appreciate you for the good things you've done in people's lives and people's businesses. God, we thank you, and we know that these things can happen because you can, oh God. Thank you. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. We want to thank you, Dr. Magara. And let's receive questions. Kindly type your questions in the chat. If you would like to speak it out, would you please put up your Zoom hand, and then you can ask your question. Okay, there is a question. There are a few questions here already. The first one says, thanks, Dr. James, for the enlightening teachings. Now, on the aspects of risks involved, impending challenges, and waiting on God for clear direction, how do you relate all these to the business principle of first mover advantage? Thanks.
I think by nature, I don't. I think that there's definitely an advantage. There's no question that there's an advantage if you're the first mover. If you're the first in the field and you take maximum advantage of the opportunities, and by the way, God does that. God will open doors for you that where other people are not looking. You still can't divorce that from faith. I think, and I just want to really emphasize this for us as Christians. Everything we do in our Christian walk is tied with our relationship with God and fellowship with the Holy Spirit. It can be exciting to hear something and you must run, you may be the first, and if the underlying spirit is, if I don't get there fast, someone's going to take it. I think you need to look again. I know there's also analysis that leads to paralysis. You can analyze and analyze and analyze and don't do anything about it. But this is where fellowship helps. Having people that you look to, you can ask questions. You can bounce things off. It's very, very helpful. And I must say, for both the things we've done, we did that because we were scared. Starting for me, I was really scared to start. These days, the people don't get scared. I was really scared. I said, I want to take a risk. I'd rather be in a safe job place. But taking that risk and taking a loan, again, I haven't given all the details of how I eventually got money. It was for me a huge risk. And so I prayed, I fasted, I consulted, I talked to Pastor Laban, who's my spiritual father, and so on. And when all the things were, those assurances, I moved. I still had to take the risk and move. So I'll just say be cautious about just wanting to be the first, If that is the only reason why you're doing it, I would say be cautious. You can get beaten as well. That's how I'd answer that.
All right. Thank you so much. There's a question from Judith. What is your opinion on the statement, spreading your time resources too thin?
Yes, I think that's sound advice. It's being, the talents were given each according to his capability. That's what it says. So you need to know, God knows your capability. And me spreading my time too thin is different from you spreading your time too thin. It's your capacity. So there are things that would let you know that perhaps you're overstretched. Certainly, you want to be where you're supposed to be. You can't be in everything. So I think there's sound advice in that, but that goes back to knowing what your capacity is.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay, this is from Angelina. Please clarify a bit more about mammon. What should we be aware of?
Mammon, Jesus equated mammon to a god. You serve God or serve mammon. Today, the extreme we see, when someone serves mammon, they'll do anything to get that mammon. In the extreme, we see people lying, cheating, killing. When you begin to breach God's principles for the purposes of money, then you are in a red zone. It could be your time. It could be how you treat other people. It could be, for the sake of money, you're lying, you're cheating, you're providing substandard service. You're beginning to serve mammon. So I think it's God's value system and the value system that relates with money. Where are you? Where are you when it comes to that and what you're doing? And it can be a thin line sometimes when you're walking, because it's something going on in the heart, We may be looking exactly the same in front here, but one is serving God, one is serving mammon. So I think it's a heart thing. Is God above? Do you pay your dues? There's so many different principles that come up. Yeah. But are you following God's principles? You're following other principles that are contrary to God.
Okay. Fiona Lukwago, your hand is up. You please share your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Magara. And probably it's in line with what Angelina just asked. My question is on, as you see the returns from your investments and as the opportunities become more apparent, because I believe the more you invest, the more your eyes are opened to more opportunities. How do you guard against maybe giving less. You see, you ended your talk with the giving principle. So how do you guard against not earmarking all your returns for more investments and giving less, let's say, to charity, to the church, to friends, to family? I think still in the spirit of Mammon, how do you guard against that? Because now it becomes really exciting to go on investing.
Mm.
Do you find that you continue with your giving the way that you were giving before you reach this level of your returns of investment?
I think the key thing is to structure your giving. And that's what we have done over the years. And of course, whenever you get into a new zone, you can get destabilized. But structure, what goes to the tithe, what goes to kingdom, kingdom work. For me, the tithe is really kingdom work. And so if that is structured, and as it grows as well, having accountability is a very key thing. I found it's very helpful. If you're married, then you have accountability with your spouse. But if not, or if it's how the structure is, or the organization is structured, having those accountability places helps a lot. But structure it, and it's easier done when you're still small. Once you begin the practice when you're small, it becomes easier when you grow. You don't feel it as much, when you have to give out, if you're giving out, a tithe of what is it? 100,000 shillings, or it's if you've got the principle, 10,000 shillings, but time comes when you have to give out, the time when we gave out a very significant amount of money for something kingdom. It's really significant. But at that point, your mind is, if you've structured your giving, it's much easier because this is not my portion. So that's the advice I'd give, and practice early. Because as it goes, then to be less of a hold. Yeah. So then you also know, I see people like Dance and Kasuli on the call, talk about saving. What is the portion that goes towards saving? What's the portion? It's that discipline, develop that discipline. And again, that is something that we didn't learn, in most of us growing up, but something we try to do with our children, to teach them early, as you give them money allowances, one envelope for the tithe, one envelope for this, one envelope for that. It becomes ingrained, and something we can teach our children as well as we learn ourselves.
We have a question from Sandra. Have you ever made losses? What did you do when it happened?
Yes, I've told you about the losses. When we tried to start a shop, you have two options. You can say, I'll never ever do business again, or you can say, what have we learned? One of the things we learned that time is that now some people do it well, but we found it very difficult to, one, you need to know who you're working with. You need to have a certain quality of people you're working with. That's number one. Number two is, the second point was running through my mind. Know the people you're working with, know the business, sometimes you even know the business, but learn the lessons. What are the lessons? What mistakes did we make? That is so critical for every failure. What mistakes did we make? When we, sometime back, my wife started a piggery business, and we learned, we didn't know the business very well. The first time we took pigs for slaughter, my God, we just realized how the market works. And the time came and we realized this will not work. We closed it. So there's a time when you also realize, okay, maybe this is not a good deal. We realize you pick up your stuff and move on. Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, we have 2 minutes. This is an observation that many times we are driven by worldly standards, i.e. putting up mansions to fit in society, even if we are not prepared for it or it ain't God's timing. There's a question here from Bob. How can we best save money? Keep it in the bank, SACCOs. What is the best model for saving? Bank loans can be burdensome.
I think the SACCO and purpose organizations, investment organizations are really a good way to go. I was talking to a friend recently who they have got loans. I think they're in YSAFE, and they got loans for their house from there. And that you're borrowing from your organization. We need to move in that direction very strongly. I've seen how banks operate. I've seen, again, sorry if you work with the banks, but if you work with the banks, you better study the global banking system, the international banking system, because there's something going on in the nations at national level, even within the nations, that we need to be more aware about. So, just know that every time you borrow money, you're paying for it. It's not free money. So your question is, how expensive is it? The word that is used, which fools many of us, is the word interest. That word interest is a cost of money. So how costly is it? Take time to really understand that, because when you're in a pressured position, you want a quick, people going to money lenders, and you wonder, how on earth would you go to a money lender? These are the worst, And again, I hope there are no money lenders. I'm sure there are good money lenders here. But some of the interests are just crazy. But when you're in pressure, you just want money from any source, and you need to resist that temptation. It's a temptation I've experienced, and I know what it is. But so saving. Going back to the question, saving organizations, saving clubs. There are a number of them available today. That's a good place to be. The bank is the least you can do, because what does the bank do? You put your money there, and what they do, they use your money to lend it to other people, and they give you a small part of the interest. It's not bad, but again, the amount is, you could probably do much more. So thank God there are a lot more people now who can give business advice in this regard.
Okay, you've talked about using your savings. In most instances, start and enlarge. How did you manage to accumulate such savings? I think that will be our last question.
Yeah, well, they're not lying. I told you when I started Jubilee, I didn't have any savings. I had zero. We're just barely, today people don't realize that we started, but we're just barely surviving. I came back from the UK, no salary from a career for 6 months. It was tough. So that's one way to start. It was starting in faith. We had to get help from a friend. When the banks turned their backs on us, a friend believed in us and invested in the business. There are some testaments I haven't had time to give. But then secondly, when we started buying, we had some money to start. That was not a lot. We had money to do we started with what you have. And the thing is, don't look for the huge amounts to start. Start where you are. As you're faithful what you're doing, the time will come and you can do more. So it wasn't like, Vine had significant amounts of money to start the school. No. We didn't have that. We had a little, we just used it to renovate a building that we were going to start in. And that was it. And then we started. So start where you are.
Thank you. Okay, this is the last question. Richard Lutaro, could you please ask a question? I can see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Magara. A very, very invigorating talk. Now, with looking at you and perhaps your wife, with all these streams of work, do you rest? How do you manage to create time to rest, even with the different other streams of ministry and invitations? How do you manage that? And how do you manage to recreate and also to invigorate your body? A lesson I want to learn, at least to get a feel of how we've been doing it.
Okay, very good question. So I just got to send a message to meeting I'm going to now. Yeah, very good question. One of the things, that's a strain. I mean, I work hard. I work really hard. By the end of the day, I'm tired. I usually ring fence my Sundays as much as possible. That's the rhythm God has given us. I will tend to have a nap on Sunday. I'm not very, very keen on invitations. I minimize them on Sundays, and that gives me that weekly rhythm. Now, the other thing that I've done more in more recent years, well, in the last few years, I've not really done this much, but taking off time. I think it came to light. I'll take advantage of some of my trips to rest. But in the last 2 years, I haven't traveled much. And so I had to get the 2020 was, we didn't know what was happening, we're thrown off balance. But last year I took off time. You take off time and you take leave. I'll get away from work, because if I said I'm working on Sunday, people will come. If I said I'm working in the night, people will come. Sometimes by calling you, can you come and see me now? No, it's at night, So setting your start and stop times, and then purposing leave time, time you get away. Just in a few weeks' time, I'm getting away. Just for me, I can't get away from Kampala. Kampala people always find me. So I have to get out of Kampala, go somewhere else, drive, go to Entebbe somewhere, or go to Jinja, or go somewhere else. So there are the weekly rest cycle God has given us to make use of that. I'll sleep in, I'll have extra hours on Sunday, and then times when I go out like this, I'll take my rest. That's how I've managed it. So, in fact, now I'm being more purposeful about every quarter, taking off some time and just getting away. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you so much. Time has gone. We shall discuss the unanswered question in the night. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Magara. If we can unmute and share in the words of the grace, please. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, love of God,
Fellowship
fellowship
of the
of the
Holy
Holy
Spirit.
of God,
That's all.
fellowship of the Holy Spirit,
and forevermore.
with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.